I'm Christy Bishop, and you're listening to the What Nobody Tells Us podcast. Each week, I'll be exploring a topic that's often stigmatized, misunderstood, or simply left unaddressed. And we're going to be shedding light on the things that nobody tells us, but that everyone should know. Let's get started. Today's episode is about retirement, that nebulous concept of when can I stop working? When can I finally live the life that I want to live? When can I achieve #life goals, whatever those might be, whether it's traveling the world, sitting on your couch, catching up on every television show known to man, visiting family across the world, whatever it might be. There's this notion of you work forever, and then you retire, and then you die. At least that's what the Instagram account that I follow, which is @work_retire_die, tells us. And there's no shortage of memes around retirement and not understanding retirement, but we can't wait to get to retirement. So today's guest is an expert in all things finance. She, full disclosure, is Brian's and my, and actually several of our friends who introduced her to us, financial advisor. Her name is Chantel Bonneau Stewart. Chantel is founder at WiseFit Financial. She's part of Northwestern Mutual's overall group, and she is part of this incredible team of experts, but she's literally one of those people who is put on this earth to work in finance. She tells her story starting in the 3rd grade when she wanted to be class treasurer, and she has been that person who is managing money for herself and others since the tender age of 8, which is incredible because we put so much trust and faith in her. She is absolutely fabulous, and she has clarified every single thing he and I could have ever wanted to know about retirement, about the types of accounts that we have, the differences between types of investments and savings, what we need to do for the future. But she was also the first person to ask us, what are your goals? How old do you want to be when you retire? And that was the first time I had ever thought about it. And I was like, oh my God, I just turned 45 last week, and I don't want to work forever. My parents are still working. Obviously they have more flexibility than most, but they're still tied to their jobs. And I don't think I want to be doing that at 70 plus years old. But she really goes through the details of what we need to know about retirement. She debunks myths. She talks about the mistakes that she sees made over and over and over again, that if you're doing these things, you can absolutely avoid them, and how. She talks about the different types of accounts, different types of investments, why it's so critical that you diversify your investments, and also what to do if you're a little bit older and you haven't really started saving. What can you do? Like, is it too late? And the short answer is no, it's never too late. But obviously, we want to start saving as young as we can and as early as we can to really, take advantage of compound interest over time. And we want to make sure that we're able to build our wealth. I'll use air quotes because there are a vast majority of Americans who do not have wealth to build and are really living paycheck to paycheck. So what does that mean for someone who does not have anything saved and they don't even know where to start, or even if they can start? So we cover all of these bases. Another question that I asked her that I think is critical right now, especially in the tech and the media, entertainment, advertising, and marketing industries, is say you have this nest egg that you've put together for the first half of your life, and you're looking at 401ks. You've got Roth 401ks and traditional 401ks, and you've got life insurance from your corporation you worked for. You've got savings, but you're out of work. And it is incredibly difficult as a senior level executive to get back to a job that affords you the financial stability and the benefits and the salary that you were used to for many years. And now you're looking down the barrel of, oh my God, I'm going to have to start tapping into savings. I'm going to start having to tap into investments and different accounts, knowing maybe you think there's penalties, maybe there's not, but you're not entirely sure. She details out what you need to do, what are the best accounts to go into first, why you shouldn't panic at this moment in time, and just put together a strategy. And she outlines how to do that as well. So this is incredibly robust conversation. We could have talked for hours about this, but this topic is so top of mind for a lot of people in our friend group. And, as we hit the next 10, 15 years, a lot of us want to enjoy our lives. But that doesn't necessarily mean we want to completely stop working. So there's this idea of like continue working, but on your own terms. What about building your own business? What about traveling the world while you're working, doing things completely remote? Like the notion of retirement has completely flipped on its head with the generations that are coming into their own now compared to, the greatest generation and compared to the baby boomers as they age. So we're experiencing the definition of retirement and redefining retirement in a way that no one's done before. So for better and for worse. We also talk about Social Security. So there's a whole conversation around that. And she explains what it is, when you can get it, what type of penalties there are if you take it out early, what happens if one spouse predeceases another spouse, what happens if you're single. Again, like we get into all of the things. So that's my high level. I'm so excited for you to hear Chantel just, share her expertise because I adore her. And Brian and I really thought we had a lot of our stuff together, and we did. But she was like, you guys are 50% there. We will get you the other 50% of the way. And she just organized it all. So we could not be more thrilled with her. And I thought she would be a perfect guest to help all of you with any of the retirement questions or just confusion that you might have. So without further ado, please enjoy this episode with Chantel Bonneau, founder of WiseFit Financial, part of Northwestern Mutual. Hi, Chantel. Welcome to What Nobody Tells Us.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
You are one of my favorite people in the world, like for so many reasons, which we will get into. But I am so happy that you are here because you're going to help demystify a topic that seems so simple on the outset. But when you and I and Brian first started talking about it, like 2 years ago now, 2.5 years ago now, it's far more complicated than it seems.
Yes, well, the feeling is mutual, and this is one of my favorite topics, and I hope I can make people be very excited about what we're going to share today.
I have a feeling if they're listening, they are. So full disclosure, and I've said this in the intro, Brian and I work with Chantel and her amazing, amazing team at WiseFit, newly branded WiseFit, and they have made all of the difference in our life in terms of just not just education and filling in the gaps, but making sure that we're on track and being supportive and relatable and approachable. And like the attention to detail is like chef's kiss. Like, and I really don't like that phrase, but I'm using it because it's applicable.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
So you are one of those people literally put on this earth to do what you're doing in finance. And I love some of your early anecdotes. Do you mind sharing a little bit of your background and kind of where the passion for all things finance and numbers came?
I would love to. So like you just said, this was not an accident that I ended up in the financial world. My entire life, I think beginning in third grade, I've been the treasurer of everything. So in third grade, my teacher, I remember it so clearly, introduced a monetary system. If you do a good job or you raise your hand, you get, little fake money, and then you can buy candy or whatever is important to you in third grade. And I just had a paradigm shift, and I had never seen such a great idea, and I loved it. I ended up pitching that idea to my fourth and then fifth grade teacher, asking us to continue. I wanted to spearhead it. And my whole life, I've just loved talking about money, not in a greedy way, but I've appreciated the power you have when you feel confident in what you're doing with dollars, whether they're fake classroom dollars or real dollars. And then fast forward to college, I entered UCLA in 2006 studying economics. My plan was to go into finance. I, as a wise 18-year-old, didn't really know what that actually meant, but that was my plan. There was obviously a very large recession in the middle of my collegiate experience. And I had so many friends and people that I knew that were impacted by that and had questions. And my parents lost, not my parents, my friends' parents lost their jobs, or things were changing. And I would casually coach them through these conversations, obviously unskilled and untrained. And I realized that this was a profession. Financial planning is something where you work with people and help them build a healthy relationship with money, make proactive choices. And I could be a real champion for positivity in this space during good economic times, bad times, moments of personal victory, moments of challenge you never could foresee coming. And my spirit was ignited at that point. And here we are. I was committed to that, finding a role in financial planning. And I've been working in the field since I graduated from UCLA at 22. And I am with you, Christy. I am very lucky. I never take it for granted that this is what I was meant to do.
Yeah. I mean, how incredible to find your purpose in the third grade and not realize it, right? But
Exactly.
I think one of the things that, just for anyone listening, when you think about a financial planner, it's like that sounds great, but it's also very nebulous. So it's not necessarily something that everyone knows the granular structure of what that actually means and the benefit it can have in their life. And one of the things that I've loved the most as it relates to the concept and the very real idea of retirement is that Brian and I thought that we were in pretty good shape. Like I had always had 401ks through my work. My dad and my mom set up life insurance for me when I was a kid. Brian did not have any of that because he's always been a 1099 employee, but he had savings. So we had this structure that we thought kind of would get us close. And then when we met with you guys, it was just absolutely incredible to be like, okay, here's where you are. You've done a great job. But so many people get nervous to talk to a financial planner. They're ashamed because they don't know what they don't know, or they're embarrassed that they should be further along, but they haven't. And you guys have just made it so easy. And like, I remember you very specifically said to us, you're 50% there. Let's fill in the other 50%, give you a very tangible plan about how to get there and what it requires to retire by the age of X. And to me, that was crazy because I'd never actually thought about the age I want to retire because both my parents still work and they're in their mid 70s, which is my nightmare. But I think when thinking about the concept of retirement, obviously my perspective of it is a very different perspective than my parents have. So can you talk to that shift in perspective between generations and kind of what you're seeing about retirement?
Yes, it's behavioral finance is to me the most interesting thing because you get it all in there. You get emotions, feeling, money, family. So it's a really fun topic. And going back to one thing that you said, the name of our firm is WiseFit because we want to be the right fit and provide some wisdom to our clients. But also, I love a good play on words and financial fitness and physical fitness are really similar in that you're never done. You're always having to tweak as you change, as you get older, as your priorities change. It's not really that hard, but it is really hard, right? Physical fitness, it's not that hard, but the discipline, the time, not injuring yourself, right? Making, all these perfect choices, it's hard on a daily basis. And um, and you brought up one thing, which is so many people say, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to start this conversation. And what I would encourage people is a little bit of progress makes all the difference and it makes it easier. So I just wanted to tie in where the genesis of that name came from.
Mm.
What you brought up about the difference between generations is something we see all of the time. So just to level set, we as humans have only really started retiring about 3 generations ago. So we're not particularly good at retiring because we haven't done it for 10,000 years. I don't even know how old humans are, but where it's really hard to parent, and we've been doing this forever, right? People have been parenting forever, and still when you have a baby, it's smacks you in the face. Retiring really began in more like the 50s. So when I think about my great grandparents who I never knew, they were probably the first generation that really stepped into retirement with some level of social security, maybe a pension, depending on where they worked. And then you fast forward, we had another generation, the greatest generation, as we call them, that really began retiring in the 80s and 90s. And then we're dealing with the baby boomers now, and then we're next. But we're not that great at it, and things continue to change in society, which makes retirement different. So when interest rates are really high, like they were in the 80s or 90s, people could retire, take a lump sum, and just live off their interest. Maybe some of you have have heard that conversation before. I remember it very distinctly from my grandmother talking about, oh, I have to go roll over a CD. Like I live off of my interest and my pension. And that was one perspective. And that changes over time. It's not quite the same circumstance today. It most definitely wasn't 10 years ago. So we have to acknowledge that just the economic environment will play a role. And guess what? You and I equally have no idea what it's going to be like next year, let alone 10 years from now, let alone 50 years from now.
Yeah.
So that's one piece of the puzzle is there's so many variables to retirement that are way beyond our control, which makes it eternally difficult.
Especially as pensions are fewer and far between
Oh
these
yeah,
days. Yeah.
few and far between.
Yeah.
And then beliefs change, right? There's many clients I work with and family members I have that view retirement as a time to really pare down. They live off a very small fixed amount of money and they're happy, and that's great. That's wonderful. And then there's a different subset of people that think, wow, I finally have time, right? I finally have time. I want to go on these great vacations. I want to move where or have a second home wherever my kids live. I want to put a lot of money into, medical care so that I can be mobile and agile, and everyone has a very different perspective, and that's where generic advice around retirement is hard. We have to look very specifically at your objectives and try not to only look at what someone else does and think that you're going to mimic that.
Yeah. When you think about retirement and like when someone thinks about retirement, it's kind of like the end of work. But it's not that simple because for so many people, especially now, the work and life is really it's blending together so much. And a lot of people don't want to just be done working if they're doing something they love and they can continue to make a living, but just do it so much more flexibly. That feels like it's a lot more appealing to someone versus like a career, you have your pension, you end at X age, and then you enjoy your golden years, right? But there's kind of one of those misconceptions around retirement is that you work and then you're done and that's the end. What other misconceptions can you share about the idea of retirement?
So the one you brought up is a huge one. And I think most of my clients think that they say this joke and they're maybe the only one that's ever said it, but I'll ask a question like, tell me a little bit about retirement and your goals for that. Have you thought at all about what that means? When? And so many people, make this joke. Is yesterday an option? I mean, if I had a dollar for every time I heard that, and I laugh every time because it is funny, but I have clients that are in that phase of life like us that are accumulating, growing, right? Like building their careers, raising their kids. And then I have clients at the other end of the spectrum that are approaching retirement, entering, or in retirement.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have noticed that surprised me, they don't teach you this in the textbooks that I get, is so many people desperately want to get to this place of financial independence where they can retire. They have all the feelings we all have. I love what I do for a living, but I have my moments too where I'm like, when am I going to retire? And um, and I've had so many clients that when we get to a place that we say, yep, you have enough with all of these risk parameters in there and you could step back. And then all of a sudden, what do? They're not interested in retiring anymore.
Mm-hmm.
When the pressure is off, when they don't feel like they have to, sometimes people go to their boss and they say, hey, listen, I am just only interested in working 60%, for 60% pay. And sometimes their boss says, okay, I'll take it. Other people say, I'm going to move into consulting. They run a business. They're just going to change the demographic of what they do. So that tells me that as more and more people approach a period of financial independence, I think we're going to see more of that. And obviously technology helps where we don't have a retirement party on your 65th birthday with an ice cream cake. And then you pack up your box, you leave, and you relocate directly into the rocking chair watching Wheel of Fortune.
Right.
That might be some people's retirement, but it's not going to be everyone's. There's going to be so many people that have a second or third or fourth act or move into some subset of what they do now, or utilize the skills that they've developed over time and monetize at some level. That's a really big deal. Other things, to your point, that people just don't expect in retirement
Mhm.
are, number one, that you're just going to spend less. Some people imagine, especially if they're in the phase where they've got kids and club soccer and family vacations, and, they have to buy 6 plane tickets anytime their family goes anywhere.
Mhm.
And let's pretend that they spend $16,000 a month to live their life now. They
Mhm.
think, oh, at some hypothetical point in the future, I'm going to have my house paid off. These kids are going to be out of here. I could totally live off of $4,500 a month. And maybe they can, right? It's why I never go into any conversation making assumptions.
Yeah.
But what so many people forget is the factor of you finally have time.
Yeah.
So is that when you're going to want to stop traveling? You might have increased medical costs.
Mhm.
Um, Even if your house is paid off, guess what? Things break, right? Even if your car's paid off, it may, but it also might not last you 45 years.
Mhm.
Um, so that's a big piece of the puzzle, is helping people really connect to what they're going to want in that phase of life. Another thing I think people underestimate is when professionals or services build retirement models, we have to put variables in.
Yeah.
So we have to say certain things like, how much do I want to spend? What is the tax rate? What
Mhm.
state do I live in? What is inflation? What is my rate of return on the assets that I have?
Mhm.
We make an assumption that Social Security is going to go up by some inflationary figure. There are so many variables there, and we need these models. And I know our team does a really good job of trying to be conservative in our models. When I say conservative financially, it means showing a slightly lower average rate of return than we would expect, showing
Mhm.
a slightly higher spend rate, like kind of making all the worst case scenarios, because I'd rather not be wrong. But there's so many variables in there, and people underestimate how substantial those variables can be,
Yeah.
such as tax code. It is not guaranteed, it is not fixed. The government can change it. They can change it on your marginal bracket. They can change how much you pay in capital gains.
Mhm.
So those are some of the things that I think people are just absolutely not expecting when they go into retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. But I love the phrase financial independence that you said, because that to me feels like a much more realistic definition of retirement. It's not the work and then stop and hit the wheelchair with Wheel of Fortune, the wheelchair, the rocking chair, Freudian slip, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to get to that point. You want to have financial independence so you can do the things you want to do, still work as much as you want to do, and be able to make that choice on your own volition, but instead of having that choice made for you, good, bad, or otherwise. When you talk about these variables and the the system, that you will, I want to use, like, you can use us as an example, or you can use a generic example. But when people come to you and say, okay, I've got X, say 25% of my world together, my financial world together, and you
Mhm.
guys are looking at the other 75%. What are some of the variables that you'll look at to get someone to retirement? Because there were things that I had no idea about, like, for example, some certain types of life insurance, and then things for Tessa. Like, what are some of those individual facets that you guys look at?
Yeah, so I'll speak broadly. Again, just the asterisk mark that has to go on anything I ever say is it depends on the client, depends on the person. So,
Of course.
never take these comments for direct advice, because you always need to start with your priorities, right? Nothing is a good idea for everyone in our field, and if anyone tells you it is, they're generalizing too much. But some of the components that, like you mentioned in the very beginning, that a lot of people tend to be aware of are employer sponsored retirement plans.
Mhm.
So those are things like 401ks, that would be the most common, or a 403b if you work for a nonprofit, is a similar vehicle where you can defer dollars and save toward retirement. Great. Awesome. Can be really helpful, especially if you have an employer match. If you're self employed, there's similar vehicles you can do for yourself. Other components are, being a good steward of your money and paying down debt, right? It
Mhm.
gets harder and harder to enter that period of independence if you have consumer debt. Not all debt is equal. Mortgage debt, especially if you were one of those very, very lucky people that locked in a 2.5% mortgage, right? Kiss that mortgage statement when it comes in the mail, because that is
Mhm.
basically an asset in my mind when you look at our environment today. But paying down consumer debt, um, is key if it's high interest rates. So evaluating that. You brought up Tessa, but our kids are really important, and it can be blinding when you're in the midst of everything. We're that sandwich generation. Our parents are getting older, raising kids, childcare is expensive, all their activities are expensive, school, the thought of college, which is just crushing when you think about how expensive it is.
Yeah.
And it can be hard to get ahead of that and think that you would want dollars for them after all of that. Like, what else could they want from me, right? I pay for the world's most expensive dance classes and your private school tuition, and what else could they want from me? But so many parents want to be able to continue helping their kids in different ways based on their means, obviously. But are we saving, if that is a priority and you have the means, are we saving specifically for that versus everything in retirement and you're double counting, and then your kids come to you for help with a down payment or to pay off a little bit of remaining school debt? So if that's a priority, are we saving into vehicles there? You brought up life insurance. Life insurance is misunderstood by a lot of people, but there are some very important components of that play a really big role. So life insurance provides death benefit, obviously, but there are different kinds. A lot of individuals think when they picture their long-term retirement that they'll never need life insurance after their kids are raised and once they're retired. But unfortunately, through personal experience, I have seen this where if one spouse predeceases the other, meaning, let's say we have spouses that are the same age and one of them passes away, unfortunately, at 72, and then the other one passes away at 92. There can be a really big hole left by Social Security that we were planning on receiving for both parties.
Mm.
So that is something, again, I didn't learn in a textbook. I learned through a real life experience with a client and seeing the damage of that. And that changed my perspective on the types of clients that I'm talking to about owning death benefit after their employer plans go away. There's also mechanisms to save inside of it and have access to equity. So there's vehicles like that again are not right for everyone, but are worth considering. There's other vehicles like long-term care insurance, which provides care dollars for care if you have an outsized cost medical event. And that's a fear so many of my clients have, is the model looks good, but man, I hope I don't get dementia and have to go into a very expensive, situation for 5 years.
Yeah.
So when we're talking to our clients about that gap, like you mentioned, Christy, we're looking at all the traditional retirement vehicles. We're looking at some of the mechanisms that provide safety in the event that there's an outsized expense or a premature passing.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at additional dollars that can be saved toward taxable investment accounts or paying down debt. We're looking at all of those circumstances. It's all part of the puzzle. I think the last thing I'll say on this is, you and I talked about this, but my skin, crawls when I watch these financial commercials that say things like, "What's your number?" And some person, some paid actor will say, "I found out I needed $1.21 million for retirement." And it doesn't work that way. Number one, are we talking about taxable money? Are we talking about tax-free money? Is this market based? Is it not? There's just so many pieces to that make it harder. It does make it more complicated, which I know is not what people want to hear. But in fairness, we work our entire lives, right, to accumulate money. You have to have a quality strategy. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it does have to be thoughtful, and that's what makes it hard.
Yeah. I think about you. You've mentioned some things like private school and college and all of these things. And in a very privileged world, there are so many people that are able to provide those, but there are many, many, many people who are not. And I read a stat the other day that said something to the effect of that over for 50% of Americans will be absolutely financially devastated by an unexpected cost or bill of $500, which
Yes.
A made me want to die. And so,
Mhm.
and B made me think about, my gosh, A, how fortunate we are that I've been in roles where I can have a 401k. And I've also been very smart about like, maxing those out every time, much to my chagrin, but my parents were like, max it out, max it out. I didn't understand why when I was 23, but I understand now at 45, right? But when I think about people who really don't have anything and they're living paycheck to paycheck, but they still have children and they want to do something for them, and they know that they're getting older and there may be health issues, there might be unexpected costs and bills. What are some easy ways you could, obviously generic, not specific because you don't know their specific
Mhm.
situation, but what are some like beginner ways that you could share for people to kind of start thinking about retirement planning?
Yes, so you're right. The spectrum is vast for where people are financially. And so everyone is fighting a very, very different battle.
Yeah.
When people have much more limited resources, some of the things I encourage people to do, it sounds so simple, but first and foremost, really have a clear understanding of what comes in and what goes out every month. That will help you make much more proactive choices. And frankly, it's probably, no matter what your economic circumstance, probably one of the best gifts you could give your children is awareness to cash flow.
Yeah.
It sounds small, but it's a big deal that you know what comes in and what goes out. If there is a little bit of spread, that makes it helpful to know as you come across new things, right? Taxes go up, or you need a new car, or there's a medical bill. You have the baseline of what your cash flow is, so you know how dramatic that's going to be, like how impactful it's going to be. Can you afford to pay $100 a month more toward a medical bill? It just gives you a place of information.
Yeah.
So, just like so many people, back to our fitness analogy, they want to get in shape before they start going to the gym because they don't want to look like a fool when they get there. Um, and we've all felt that way, right? Like, I want to lose weight before I meet the trainer and they weigh me. And, you know,
Yeah.
um, and that's one of those pieces that it's always better just to know the truth, know where you're at. Another big component is understanding where your credit score is and doing everything in your power to protect it, because that plays a really big role in what's available to you in the future and
Yeah.
what you will pay if you ever finance anything, a car, right? I mean, a home. I know that's not as easy of a feat anymore, but protecting your credit score, again, a big gift you can give your children.
Yeah.
And another component is just be organized. You and I have spent a lot of time on this,
Yeah.
talking about how important this is, but have your ducks in a row, right? Have organization for how your bills are paid. If you have assets, do you have a trust? Do you have a medical and financial power of attorney?
Mhm.
Those things, if you can't give your kids a pile of money, right? Which we can argue if that's good or bad. But if you can't give them a pile of money, give them good habits, give them awareness, and give them organization.
Yeah. I think financial acumen is something that should absolutely be taught in schools.
Oh,
Genuinely. I
yes.
mean, I
Men.
that is so right, like such a soapbox that we're already teaching Tessa. She's 7.5 years old, and we're already teaching her little things. Like when we give her an allowance, which she very rarely gets because she doesn't do a whole lot of chores. We're working on it, but we tax her. And she's like, "Why did you give me everything?" I'm like, "Because the government's not going to give you everything."
Yeah.
We literally tax her. We haven't
A
explained
good life lesson.
right, variable tax rate right now, it's a fixed tax. But just we're starting young. But on the opposite side of that, there are often people who maybe come into money later in life, or come they wake up to the fact that, oh my gosh, I'm getting older, I need to do something about this, but they might think that it's just too late, like, shit, I should have done this earlier and I didn't. But what are some ways that you can recommend to people who are starting later in life in terms of saving and retirement, but they might feel completely defeated because, like, God, if I had started this when I was 30, if I'd started this when I was 25, but now they're like 55 or 60,
Mhm.
like, is it too late?
Yes. If anyone is listening to this that is, 20, 25, 30, 35, I hope you picked up on that. I've never had a client that said I should have not saved earlier,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because it makes such a difference. Every 100, this is simple math based on, I think it's a 6% rate of return in a deferred account. Every $100 you start saving at 25 years old, systematically per month, is worth a little over 200 grand by the time you're 65.
Oh my
So
gosh.
if at 25 you start saving $100 a month, and then at 26 you add another 100, another 100, that's, such a path of least resistance is starting young, and those dollars matter. So if you're listening, skip a DoorDash every once in a while and be disciplined there. It does make a difference.
Yeah.
For the individuals who, like you said, have just been fighting the good fight, sometimes people get divorced and they have to start over. Their assets get divided. Divorce is very expensive. They were in a career where you didn't make a lot of money, and then maybe we're finally at a place where cash flow is good or whatnot. I go back to that. The truth is better than not the truth when it comes to finances. So know where you're at, and it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's not perfection or nothing, just like health. What can we do that moves the ball forward a little bit? And sometimes when we work with clients that are in that position, it's what can we save? And let's just start. Maybe we're not going to retire at 62, but perhaps we can build a plan where we get to a point that we can keep bringing in certain income for a while and be able to delay Social Security until 70, so we can get more out of that, right? Perhaps there's opportunities based on your type of business. If you have higher and lower earning years, where we can milk a little more out of good tax strategy. So something is better than nothing. It all provides more options. And that's what's hard for people, is people love checking a box. And this is a really fuzzy box. So you can't quite draw it only inside the lines. But I always just encourage people, something is better than nothing. If you're trying to get back in shape, I equate retirement to running, an Ironman.
Mm.
If if you can do an Ironman, go you, right? Like, that is amazing. And if that's you and you've completed 4 of them, high five virtually. But if you can't do an Ironman, but you can functionally walk 5 miles when you're 75 years old, like, that's pretty darn good too. So I think that's the perspective people have to have, is what can I do to move the ball forward? And that's okay. Anything I do proactively gets me closer to optionality.
Yeah. I think that that's great advice, and I love the physical fitness analogies too, because it's such a relatable thing that everyone can literally relate to. But I think when people think about finances and retirement, it just gets so overwhelming and it's so vague,
Yes.
and people just don't have a clue. It's like,
Mhm.
when I worked for Farmers Insurance on the corporate side, it's the same thing with insurance plans. It's like, you need to have one, but you don't
Mhm.
exactly know like what's in it, and you know that you need it, but like then when something goes wrong, you don't know if you have the right one. It's so similar. It's so similar, but I really do, and I appreciate the wise fit. Thinking about your brand, the relatability to that, and just those metaphors. I do want to get a little bit more complicated,
Let's do
but
it.
you do such a great job at making things easy to understand. Let's talk a little bit about investment vehicles.
Yes.
So obviously people think about the stock market, they think about meme stocks. There's what is it, GameStop.
GameStop.
Yeah,
GameStop.
GameStop, which just had a rally the other day for like 2 seconds, and Roaring Kitty and all of these things. But there's just it's overwhelming. And even when I think about it specifically, and I will ask you guys questions all the time, I still get confused. So what is investing? And then what are the different ways you can invest, just to give people some education?
Yes. So everyone, bear with me. I'm going to peel this onion as thoughtfully as I can, because so many of us, we think about investing maybe as a tagline, and then we like put a bunch of stuff in there, and some of it belongs in there, some of it doesn't. But first and foremost, when you invest dollars, you are putting capital, putting dollars to work that is going to perform for good or for bad in alignment with what you have put your money into. So, really simply, most people, when they're talking about investing, are investing in stocks or bonds, either in true form or in funds. And I'll break that down. So, A stock is when you're actually buying teeny tiny ownership in a company. So if I go and I buy one share of Apple today, I am a technical owner of the company. Now, if I, drive up to Cupertino and knock on the door, they are not going to let me in, right? But technically, my dollars that went into that stock position are going to go up or down as Apple performs or not in alignment with expectations. So if I put $100 in and they do tremendously, my $100 is going to likely grow. If they make a misstep or the market turns or other circumstances, everyone decides that they hate iPhones, like whatever, then my value is going to go down. When you invest in a bond, you are literally lending money to a corporation, a municipality, a county, whatever, and then they typically give a coupon back. So bonds are different. You're lending money and then they pay for your borrowing of that. So if you've ever voted, hopefully, right? If you've ever voted, every once in a while, you will vote for a bond measure. They'll say something like, we want to build a baseball stadium and we need a, $500 million bond. Those are bonds, right? And if you were a consumer buying, a county bond, you're buying that. That's how they're financing it. So bonds perform a little bit differently. You get a coupon, but that's where interest rates. If you've been reading articles or you've been sitting in conversations with colleagues or friends, and they're saying things like, "Oh man, the bond market's really going to react when these interest rates go down." And if you find yourself, nodding along but thinking, "What?" Right? How does that?
No
What?
idea.
Why is everyone so freaked out about interest rates? Right? What's the big deal? That plays a really big effect on how bonds perform. And that's a really big deal for a lot of the more conservative financial players, right? People that want a little more safety in their portfolio.
I
When
had
you
no
have a
idea. I'm sorry about the bond measures on voting. I had no idea until right now that that's what that meant. I had no
I love
idea.
it. I love it.
I just learned.
Yeah, and I mean it's real life. That's when people say, I love it. I have a lot of nieces and nephews and they'll say things like, I'm never gonna use, this math, whatever they're working on, because I'm a math person. And they make that mistake in front of me and I'm like, oh, let me actually point out the 9 places you're gonna use this, geometry proof. And they're like, I just was saying it. Like you don't have to like tell me how I'm gonna use it. But that's my favorite party trick is telling you how you're going to use this rogue math one day.
Oh my God, I
Um,
love it.
but most of us, when we have a 401k, the offerings are funds. So a fund is a group of stocks or bonds, right, of an investment that a fund manager is overseeing in alignment with a goal. So for example, you might see inside of a 401k, US large cap growth fund. That means that it's a mix of a bunch of US, so domestic, if you're listening in the United States, US, large cap, which are the like really big companies, right? Large size, that are growth oriented stocks. So stocks that are alignment with growth, typically that means that they're not value plays, which are maybe a little bit more dividend oriented, a little bit more consistent from their objectives.
Mm-hmm.
So you would expect to see inside of a US large cap growth fund things like Apple, Microsoft. Like you would expect to see some of these big companies that are, really putting a lot of money into growing. What's nice about a fund is you get diversification. So it's not just one company, right? What if you said, hey, I have the best idea. There's this company, looks really strong. Their books look good. I mean, all their numbers are looking pretty solid. Enron, right? And then it goes awry and it's worth 0. So the only time, not the only time, but generally when people have investments that go to $0, it means that the company went bankrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You can be invested in something else, perhaps Peloton, right? That did really well, not doing, quite as hot, as they were by any measure, but it's still worth something, not a whole lot, right? But maybe you lost 98% of your value. But it didn't go to 0. 0 means the company is gone. It's worth $0. So funds can provide a little bit more diversification because you just never know, right? What could change. So as we're thinking about where to put dollars, you have to start with, what is the objective? Is my objective retirement? Is that 1 year away, 10 years away, 30 years away? That then would give you some insight as to how much risk you can stand. If you're going to retire in 30 years, maybe we could have a slightly more aggressive mix of stocks and bonds and funds, because we can withstand the roller coaster. We can withstand the volatility. If you are going to retire next week, if you are retired, our plan is to be taking money out of our account every month. Maybe it doesn't make quite as much sense to be as aggressive, because if the market goes down and you have to sell, you are just locking in that loss. So the key, I always tell people, I have clients that will, or prospective clients who start our conversation by trying to tell me the things that they want. And I'm like, don't tell me the financial tools you want. Tell me what you want. And then we'll back into it. So what is your goal for the investment? Are we buying a house in 2 years? Are we saving for college? Are we saving for retirement? Is this a rainy day fund? Let's start with the goal. Then we can back into likely risk tolerance. And then we have to look at your behavioral side. If every time the stock market goes down, are you going to flip out and sell all your position? I'm not faulting you for that, right? The world's scary. But if you do that, guess what? The market is going to go down. So don't put yourself in a position where you're really aggressive, but every time it goes down, you sell. You're basically just, hurting yourself. Yeah. So that's very fundamentally investing. The next layer, which is really important, is what vehicle is it going into? And that can make a big difference, because the different investment vehicles provide different levels of tax code. If you just heard the word tax code and you decide you want to end this listening to this, I promise, hang in there with me. Tax code is really, 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 really important. And I would give 20 more reallys if it didn't waste time. But there's retirement vehicles like your 401k, an IRA. If you're self-employed, maybe like a SEP IRA or a simple IRA. Most of those are places you can put money. You choose how it's invested, right? How risky are we? And those dollars go in pre-tax. So you get a deduction today, feels real nice. Money grows deferred, but when you take it out in retirement, you will pay tax then. That's not a good.
Knew about that. I didn't know about that years ago. I just thought it was my money, so I get my money. I didn't realize, oh, just kidding. You're going to be taxed at that tax rate when you want to take it out.
Yeah. Every time I hear that, and I hear it a lot, it gives me a lot of hope for the human population, because it means we are built to be positive, because people choose to believe that they're not paying tax. And I hear that as positivity, that they've just put that other piece out of their mind. But yes, you are going to pay tax later. That's okay, maybe, right? But you are going to pay tax later. There's Roth vehicles where you pay tax today and then it grows and you don't pay tax later, but there's income limits on how much you can make to do that, or the strategy to do that. Yeah. There are taxable investment accounts, which just means you buy stocks or bonds or whatever, and you pay capital gains tax, which is a different rate than what you pay on your earned income, as the account moves, right, over real time, not just only in retirement. So that's a piece that a lot of people have to look at, is when I enter retirement, how much money do I have? How aggressive am I? And then what type of tax statuses do I have? If I get my way, if I get to be Wizard of Oz and build exactly the plan I want for someone, I want them to walk in, and this is, again, I'm being general, right? But I want them to walk into retirement with 4 to 5 years of non-market correlated money, which means dollars that are not on the roller coaster. Yeah. That philosophy merely comes from the fact that the average bear market, bear is when the market's down, lasts about 3.5 years. So if we look back over the last, 60, 70 years, right, the average bear market is 3.5 years. Okay. So I like having a little bit of safety available that we can go into and give our stocks an opportunity to recover. Number 2, I want to have, ideally, tax-free money. So Roth, like tax-free based money, taxable money, and money that is subject to capital gains, so that we can distribute and manage the tax rate that the individual will be paying in retirement.
Mm-hmm.
People forget that in retirement, let's pretend that you're decently well off and you want to live off of $15,000 a month in retirement. That means you need 180 grand a year, right? 15 times 12 of after tax money, which means depending on where you live, you probably need to, liquidate 250 to pay tax and get your amount.
Mm.
Well, guess what we just did? We just triggered a higher capital gains rate because you're going to pay when you hit 250 as a married couple, you pay an additional tax on investments.
Yeah.
You triggered probably a higher Medicare surcharge based on your income, right? You might, depending on your state or whatnot, be in a different tax bracket. So if we have these different vehicles, we can actually control what we distribute. And I don't know how I'm going to use that for clients, but I imagine over their 30 or 40-year retirement, there's going to be ebbs and flows in tax rates, or there'll be a year your kid is getting married and you want to pay some for the wedding, and distributing that extra amount could trigger a whole different tax bracket. So it's one of those pieces. If I have the opportunity to be proactive with a client, I really want to focus on the dollars that we can get into different tax statuses so that we can at least use that variable of taxation to our advantage.
And I love that you prefaced it by saying if you heard the word tax code and you wanted to just like hit out, like I'm done. But this is one of those realities that people need to know. And they're one of the realities, and it's so complex. It's
Mm-hmm.
like you want to save a lot of money. You think, in capitalism, they want you to make a lot of money, but at the same time, then you're penalized for saving too much money, or you're penalized for putting things into 401ks and then taking them out later based on the tax. So it's so complicated, which is again why I cannot stress enough the importance of having a financial planning partner, because it's to do this on your own becomes like a full-time job, and it's like grad school or PhD to learn this in the way that Chantal and her team have learned it, and just even the way that you're explaining it, things like capital gains, the taxes you pay on your investments when you sell those stocks or get out of a fund, people just don't know about.
And they get surprised.
Yes,
And
yes.
I, I unfortunately, I think one of my best client acquisition tools are mistakes people make when they do their own investments.
Yeah.
And I don't like meeting people that way, right? I don't like meeting people because they got an inheritance. Those are not the fun ways. I'd rather them come to me because they're just proactive versus these
Yes.
moments in time that force your hand to get a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser.
Yeah.
But remember, when you go on to XYZ platform and you open an account, or you sell a stock, or you do whatever, it is not their job to tell you if you're breaking tax code. It's not their job to tell you if you're allowed to make a Roth contribution, if you're triggering a wash sale on your stock account, which means that you did something that's going to disallow, taking a loss for tax purposes.
Yeah.
And people make those mistakes and they forget. They think they're taking the path of ease,
Yeah.
but it is complicated, to your point, and there's a big difference in doing things right and being proactive
Mhm.
and looking at your planning holistically.
Yeah. So the mistakes is a question that I also had for you. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see people make, whether it's how you meet them or just in general?
Yes. Okay. So, where to begin? So the first mistake I think that I see all of the time are people contributing to retirement accounts they're not allowed to contribute to. So, an example is let's say someone was a really smart 23-year-old and they opened a Roth IRA.
Mhm.
Love it. Love, right? They're trying to do the right thing. They want, to start saving tax-free money, and they set it up to contribute $100 a month. And then fast forward, life is busy, couple kids later, right? Minivan in the driveway. Um, and the family is making above a certain amount of money that disallows the Roth, and you're still making that Roth contribution.
Mm.
And no one's going to stop you. But if you ever get audited, you're going to find yourself in trouble, and you're going to pay penalties or, have a consequence there.
Oh my
So that's
God.
a big mistake, is people set things up and then they just assume consent. No one stopped me, so it must be okay.
Sure. I would
Um,
assume that. Yeah, I'm doing the right thing.
exactly. Another mistake that I see are people that will build an investment strategy based off of an article, or, they'll listen to, a news station in the morning or something like that. And you have to remember, I love a good news outlet, but they make money via ratings,
Yeah.
viewership. So it's their job to be a little more exciting than I get to be on a daily basis, and say things like, "Oh my gosh, this company is going to go through the roof," right? I would buy this, all their antics. Um, but that is not necessarily advice. So sometimes people will make mistakes like that. Another issue I see people do all the time is they're emotionally charged. So the market goes down, they sell. Then they wait for the peak. Finally, it feels good. Then they buy at the top, right? They forget that the disciplines are what provide so much of the tailwind in financial planning, right? Consistent entry into the market, risk appropriate choices, proper tax coded vehicles, like just those fundamentals, getting that right is worth a lot and will keep you on, much more likely to be on track. Another mistake people make is they somehow accept that like a quality vacation costs more today, right? Like when you're planning a vacation, everyone knows it costs more today than it did like 5 years ago, right? With inflation, vacation, hotels, flights, everything went through the roof,
Yeah.
but just isn't stopping us, right? Um, and but when it comes to saving, they might keep doing the same $200 a month they've been doing for 10 years, right? They're not inflating their savings.
Yeah.
It still feels like $200 is a lot, not for a hotel room anymore, but for savings, yeah, like that's still a lot. So they don't revisit and make sure that they're on track with those components. Another mistake I see all the time, and this is so small, but I catch it more than I can't even believe it, are people not updating beneficiaries on accounts.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And it's still your like little brother or your ex-wife. Catch that one quite a bit. Or just someone that's not your spouse, your kids, your trust, your like whatever is your current situation.
And the beneficiary, just to explain to people, is who the money is going to go to in the
Yes,
event of your passing. It's like a
yes.
legally binding who you want it to go to on any 401k, on any investment account you may have.
Yes. And I know no one wants to talk about, no one wants to think about it, the worst case scenario, but I always say, if you do really good planning on that, I feel like somehow the universe won't play a funny trick on you because they know you're so well planned. So it benefits you, maybe. I can't prove it. Another big, I don't want to say mistake, but something in retirement that I have seen people do over and over again is they struggle to spend money.
Oh,
So
interesting.
they will enter retirement and they have plenty of money for whatever they're trying to accomplish. Super amazing first world problem, right?
Yeah.
Um, they have enough money, like everything's going to work out if nothing crazy happens.
Yeah.
All my models look good, right? Green is a go. You've retired, and then you're afraid to spend money, right? You just don't want to spend it. You get nervous to spend it. You just become, people get kind of obsessed with leaving money to kids, which is very, very nice. If that's your objective,
Yeah.
amazing, so sweet. But people just feel like they can't because it's a different feeling that's hard to conceptualize when you are earning income. This moment where all of a sudden there's no going back, like you're never going to earn another dollar. And it messes with you,
That's
right?
scary.
Because every dollar you spend, right, is gone forever.
Mhm.
And that's a different concept to think through. Another component is all that time we were accumulating, like we mentioned, Christy, you might get a deduction on your 401k. Maybe
Yeah.
you accumulated a lot of money in a stock portfolio that was at a really low basis, the amount you paid for it, and it's worth a lot more. So if you sold it, you have to pay those capital gains taxes. And at some point, I have to break it to people. Well, if you want your money, you're going to have to pay taxes on it.
Yeah.
There's no like secret strategy here. I mean, there's efficient, thoughtful
Yeah.
distribution, but guess what? Eventually, on those accounts, the government is your partner. They own
Yeah.
part of it, right? They're going to take their piece. They don't. I've never seen them let anyone off. Um, and people just hesitate to spend because they don't want to realize the taxes.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart a little bit when people don't go on the vacation. They don't, you know, get the safer car that's not going to break down and they're, 83 years old. Again, I'm the number one champion for responsibly spending and not
Yeah.
overspending to be frivolous. But I don't know if I'd call it a mistake or just a unfortunate circumstance that some people just are really hesitant to spend their money and they never
Mhm.
enjoy it.
And like live
Again,
your life.
yeah, live their life or lean into the planning work so they can feel more confident in what they can
Yeah.
spend.
Yeah. So okay, I'm gonna swing to the other end of the spectrum. This is the not super positive end of the spectrum, but it's so many people's realities right now. I know a lot of people in like marketing, advertising, and tech, creative enterprises, creative industries who have been laid off
Mm,
as the emergence of AI, as the squeeze for profit, profit, profit. We can do more,
yep,
get more with less people, all of these things. And a lot of these people have been incredibly successful for the past 20, 25, almost 30 years of their career, if they're in their 50s. And now they cannot get a new job, no matter what they do, because corporations have eliminated those senior positions, for whatever reason it might be. But it's been 6 months, 9 months, a year of trying to look for a job, and they're watching their bank accounts drain and they're starting to panic. So, because the money's not coming in, the money is going out. For
yep.
someone who's in that position, how would you prioritize which money goes out first so you can at least try to save and protect the investments that you've made towards your future?
Yes, 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 yes. I've definitely seen this now, and we always see it. It's always something. Right now, it's AI. It's kind of the change in post COVID, but there's always something, right? The market is wonderfully cyclical,
Yeah.
and so we see these things over and over again, and people get priced out, which is
Yeah.
really challenging. So back to what I said a little while ago. Step one is just know what comes in and goes out.
Yeah.
Don't keep that a secret. Again, when you're in that moment, sometimes you don't want to look because you don't want to know, right? That it's a number that if you're like, whoa, how did it become that high? How is my monthly net so high, right?
Yeah.
And no one wants things taken away, so they don't want to know. They bury
Yeah.
their head in the sand. But it's really important all of the time, but
Yeah.
especially during moments of change, to know what that is. That way we know what we're working with. If
Mhm.
this might be a 6 month, 12 month, professional hiatus, what are we really talking about? So that, to your point, we can elect the correct vehicle to be
Yeah.
the least punitive. So know what goes out. Um, if you have the ability, that's where an emergency fund is really helpful because that would be our first line of defense. And an
Yeah.
emergency fund is the cash you have in the bank that is not locked up or invested, on the roller coaster. It's
Mhm.
nice and boring and waiting for something to go wrong in your plan.
Yeah.
And the generic advice is somewhere between 3 and 6 months of your cost of living would be an appropriate emergency fund.
Okay.
So that's generic. It depends on your industry. I have some people in extremely volatile industries and they keep more, in their emergency fund. I have other people that, are a physician married to a principal at a high school, right? Those are far less economically sensitive jobs. Maybe they can
Yeah.
be on the lower end. So know your circumstances. Okay. But the emergency fund is step one because it's what it's there for, an emergency. Nothing's wrong with that. Um, the next thing is if you take money prematurely, which is defined by the IRS, not by me,
Mhm.
at 59 and a half from a 401k, a pre-tax retirement account, you
Mhm.
will pay tax on it, like we've beaten into everyone's head. You will pay tax on it no matter what. But if you take it before 59 and a half, you also pay a 10% penalty.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's the rule, right? You want your money prior to 59 and a half, you pay a 10% penalty.
Yeah.
So be careful. Pay attention to that. There are a couple of teeny tiny provisions in the tax code on being able to access a very small amount of money due to
Mhm.
certain circumstances that you could look at, like a disability, like certain circumstances
Yeah.
where maybe there's not that penalty. But those dollars you want to be thoughtful about because there is that penalty and you can't put them back.
Got it.
If it's an
Yeah.
IRA, you've got 60 days to put that money back before it like locks in time that this was a distribution and you're going to pay tax and penalty. If it's
Wow.
a 401k, they may have a loan provision,
Yeah.
but hopefully we all know when you hear the word loan, they're expecting you to pay it back and they're going to charge you an interest rate.
Of
So make
course.
sure you read the due diligence there. If you have a taxable investment account,
Mm-hmm.
so an investment account that's not sheltered in a retirement account with that penalty, that might be a viable place to take dollars from.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Pay attention to the tax ramifications, of course. And then sometimes people will have home equity lines of credit where they can borrow against their house.
Mm.
Obviously, we want to look into the entirety of the circumstance and viability on paying it back and interest rates, and realistically how long this hiatus from work is going to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes that makes sense for an individual that expects to get back into the workforce and will make enough money to pay that down. They would
Yeah.
rather do that versus permanently take from a 401k.
Yeah. I mean, it just makes me heartbroken because I see so many people in this position right now, and particularly as I'm on LinkedIn a lot, like providing a lot of
Yes.
content and advice for people. You just see this, and thank God people are helping one another. But this is additional advice that's invaluable. So thank you.
Well, just the last thing on that
Yeah,
is know your score, and when you have the ability to save more,
yeah,
go for it. Like take it.
yeah,
It doesn't. No one is ever mad because they have some money padded for these things that come up, and sometimes it's a layoff, sometimes it's a health issue, and you're
totally.
out of work for 6 months or a year or 5 years healing, or you're working through something,
Yeah,
and that completely derails your life. I mean, preparation is key. It's
yeah,
really key. And a good plan helps you focus on all the good stuff
yeah.
versus, maybe the reason we don't sleep well at night, we all need melatonin, is because we know that there are, all these risks that we're ignoring. So good planning helps you be as prepared as possible and focus on the good things.
Yes. Okay. And so 100% and start young. Like you said, start early. No one ever said, I had invested less, or I wish I had worked more and invested less
Yeah. I
or
should spend
saved
all
more.
my money. Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. So I'm just conscious of our time because we could do a
Forever.
daily podcast on this forever. There's so many
Yes.
things. I'm trying to prioritize. So you've mentioned the government, our best friend, who's going to tax you no matter what, depending on different tax codes. But there are also some things that the government will provide to you, like you mentioned Social Security earlier. Can you outline a few of the things that are maybe lesser known methods of income or sources of income in retirement that may be provided by a source like the government?
Yes. So Social Security, I'm going to say some things that I would think are obvious, but I have learned that they are not.
Yes.
And if you think, like you mentioned before, we should teach this, like, to everyone. And I'm with you. So if anyone that has a lot of power in deciding that in our country, I'm in. I want to join the forces. But in
Yes.
the meantime, we'll use this avenue. Um, so Social Security was enacted back in the day as part of the New Deal. So think like FDR time. And the point was that it provided income to individuals that are past a certain age. Back then it was, 65, sound
Mhm.
familiar, right? And it was a safety net that had not previously existed in America. And if you just try and think back, and I don't know, remember reading, books from the 1800s or before then, a lot of people lived with their family in perpetuity and worked on the farm, and then the industrial revolution came and things kept progressing, and we don't just all work as a family, and like you don't die on the farm anymore always.
Right.
So Social Security provided that safety net for this older population that may not have had the ability to be taken care of by family or have resources to take care of themselves as they age.
Yeah.
So first things first, you have to work to earn Social Security. The way that it works is they take your highest 35 years of earnings,
Hmm.
and then that goes into a formula to determine what your Social Security benefit is. So guess what? Let's pretend you do some sort of side hustle job and you are thinking, I don't pay tax, right? You also are probably not contributing to Social Security. If you don't pay into Social Security, you're not participating in Social Security. So it's not all bad, right, to pay in, and you do receive a benefit for that. Um, Number one. Number two, that gets calculated and you can begin accessing your Social Security as early as 62. You take a pretty decent haircut up to about 30%
Mm,
off of your full benefit if you
wow.
access your retire or your Social Security at age 62 versus your full retirement age, which depending on the year you were born is between 65 and 67.
Mm,
If you delay it till 70, you actually get more. Now, Social Security, so many people joke like, oh, it's going bankrupt, it's not going to be around. And I don't have a crystal ball, but it is a pretty darn important component of our country. It is extremely relied on by many, 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 many people,
yeah.
not just our lowest income people. And they will probably find a way to keep taxing us more to fund it. Like I choose to believe that there will be a remedy, and broadly speaking, it's, probably going to be important for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Um, so this does come in. You can actually log in and get estimates of your Social Security. When you work with people like me, we have formulas to give you estimates on that. But that is income that comes in. If you are married, you get yours and your spouse's. Let's say you were a stay-at-home parent your whole life and you didn't work, very much or ever, and you're thinking, "What? I'm not paying into Social Security. Does that mean I get nothing?" No, you will get half of your spouse's Social Security if you didn't have any or your number is less than that.
Oh,
So
interesting.
you are acknowledged for doing very hard work domestically at the
Yeah.
house. But one individual passes away of that couple, you only get to keep whichever Social Security is higher.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay.
so that's what I was alluding to before, where
Yeah.
when we have one spouse predecease the other, there's
Mm,
an impact there. There's a
sure.
real impact. So Social Security is so important. If you are at the top earning level that you were paying into Social Security and you took your money at 70 today, you might be getting north of $4,000 a month from Social Security.
Okay.
So let's pretend we have a married couple, two spouses doing that, 8 grand. Yes, you pay tax on 85% of that,
Mm,
but not at 85%, but
yeah.
85% of the amount you receive would be taxable.
Okay.
Um, that's a big portion. So if you want to live off 12 grand a month, it's like, wow, Social Security just provided
Yeah.
a fundamentally guaranteed amount, right? Of, $8,000 a month. I mean, that's a big portion of the job.
Huge.
So understanding that, understanding what you're on track for, understanding the ramifications if we are a married couple, if one of us passed away. Other
Mhm.
things are if you have employers that did provide a pension, sometimes people did for a period of time, or they're really lucky today. And you might have a $500 a month pension or something floating out there. So knowing that, don't lose track.
Yeah.
Annuities are private pension like vehicles you can build. So you
Mm,
put dollars in and it spits out a stream of income as long as you live, right? Or whatever the parameters of the annuity are. Annuities are, um, again, like most financial vehicles, confusing, and and people have all sorts of opinions and whatnot. But as more populations approach retirement and get have less pension dollars, that can be something that's worth understanding, right? And exploring if that's appropriate for your situation. Some
mhm.
people have rental income that comes in
Right.
retirement. And similarly, what that does is it provides cash flow. You have to be thoughtful about what insurance am I keeping, right? Am I keeping umbrella insurance? Do I have an LLC? What are the costs of the property? But that can be a pivot. Or we've seen so many people do these like ADUs or components to their house to get
Yes.
income streams. People do, like we mentioned before, side hustles or
Mhm.
consulting for a period of time. So those are some of the components that we're seeing that in addition to the investments that they have provide this mixture that's going to result in cash flow in retirement.
That is such that what a comprehensive picture. I mean, like, thank you. That is so comprehensive. And it also gives people hope that it's not all on them 100%, but hoping that, by the time that you and I get there, it's still,
Yeah.
Social Security is still there. Because I mean,
Yeah.
my parents receive it, my mother-in-law receives it, all of it,
Mhm.
all of it.
Yep.
It's hugely
Exactly.
important. Yes. Okay, last question. So people have heard all of this. They might be more confused, but if nothing else, very enlightened, but confused about the point like, oh my God, I didn't know what I didn't know. And now I
Mhm.
need help.
Yeah.
Right. Like this is, I need, but but I'm not a huge earner. I don't have millions of dollars to invest with someone. I don't have what that was the first question that I get from people when I ask them, do they have a financial planner? Because God knows I've referred you to 1,000 people.
Mhm.
The first thing people say is, well, I don't make a gazillion dollars. I'm like, well, neither do we. Like, you don't have to be a millionaire to have someone help you with your finances. So my question is, A, in the event that people wanted to find you, where could they find you? But B, in the event that they like have a different referral, what are some of the like green flags and red flags about finding a financial planner? Because there are some real bad ones there. And God knows there's the Instagram financial planners too. It's such a big thing right now. Like, what are the things to look out for?
Yes, I'm going to start with that question. So first of all, when it comes to red flags, a plan should be about you. We, people in my profession, we work for you. We work for your goals.
Mm-hmm.
I have a vision of the things that I want in retirement. It doesn't mean that they're better than someone else's goals. Some people love living in a city. Some people want to spend half of their time out of the country. Some people want to move wherever their kids are. Some people, you know, don't have kids. Some people, I mean, everyone is different. So make sure that the conversation is around your objectives. If the advisor or the planner can't clearly articulate what's important to you after one meeting, they're probably the wrong person.
Mm-hmm.
Second, if they have an overarching philosophy that does not take into consideration your specific needs, that's a red flag to me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So there are some of these financial voices that say like all debt is bad, or always do this, never do that, always buy this, never buy that. Always and never to me are red flag words, because it's just not how it works, right? Like again, back to fitness, man,
Mm-hmm.
I love exercising. It's actually my hobby, right? I love it, but you are never going to catch me in a marathon. Like
Yeah.
that is not my form.
Right.
And if you told me today you were running a marathon, Christy, I would be thrilled for you, right? Like there's great solutions for different people. And just because I'm not a marathon runner doesn't mean I'm not physically active and healthy.
Right.
Same thing with money, always and never. Their strategy versus based on your goals, those are big red flags.
Yeah.
Another component is I personally believe it is really challenging to provide financial advice without being comprehensive. The world has changed. So back in the day, there were a lot of these investment advisors that their job was to take your money and invest it. Cool, right? They might be good at that. But in today's world, it's like, okay, well, what's the tax ramification, right? Are we maximizing all strategies? Is the estate planning component like the deal's a little bit different today? So a financial planner versus an investment advisor, I think generally can provide a lot of additional help. And my job, and I tell this to clients very upfront, my job is not to get you the best rate of return possible. And nobody can promise you that. Nobody can.
Mm-hmm.
It's to get you fair, risk adjusted return within market conditions, but it's to, you like all those conditions there.
I love it. Yes.
But
Asterisks everywhere.
yes, but it's to maximize your dollars in alignment with your goals. That's everything from tax efficiency, right? Like all of those components. That's where so much of our skill provides value, is just not leaving things on the table. We're the definition of what you didn't know, right? Like
Yes,
if you're
exactly.
doing a charitable donation, are we doing it the right way? Are we using the right retirement vehicle? Are we tax loss harvesting? I mean, all of these little pieces. Did we get the right benefits from work that they offered? Did you check the right box?
Yeah.
And so the red flags are when people overly simplify, or they direct you toward only rate of return or something like that. As far as our team, we love new people, and we love people that care. I think that that's what's most important to us, is people that care about their future, about their planning. That's what I can work with.
Yeah.
And that sounds obvious, but it's not, right? Some people just want a transaction, and we're too committed. We like supporting people. So I'm sure this can be in comments or in show notes, but
Mm-hmm.
our website is my name. So Chantel, Chantel Bonneau, BONNEAU.com. And that's where you can find information on us and reach out if you have questions. I get questions about, do we work with people in different parts of the country? The answer is yes. But if we ever don't, fit your needs, we have great partners we can refer you as well.
Yes, love it. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your passion, your excitement, and your love for what you do since the third grade, because it has been the best thing, genuinely one of the best things in the entire world for Brian and I. Not only do we feel so much better, like financially, but you and your team are just some of, like I said in the beginning, some of our favorite people and favorite friends in the world. And we always look forward to jumping on. It's like, it's not the dentist. People should not look forward to their financial advisor meetings or their investment advisor meetings with like dread. Like, we get excited. And especially if there's an issue or there's a change. I mean, we have a good mutual friend whose husband lost a very high profile job. And she's like, we called Chantel before we called our parents.
Never take it for granted that I am on the top 5 call list when good or bad things happen. That's how I know I have a client relationship, that we're doing our job right. Is if I possibly edge out your parent or your best friend for information, we've done something right. So that means a lot to me. And it's fun. It's fun to progress. It's fun to have a healthy relationship with money. It's fun to think about the future in a proactive, thoughtful way. And it's always a privilege to work with people in that aspect.
Amazing. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it so much. This has been wonderful.
Thanks, Christy.
Well, that's it. Another episode of What Nobody Tells Us. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you felt something. I hope you learned something. And I hope you feel empowered to go reach out to somebody who might be going through something you don't understand. Lean in, ask the questions, make the connection, be the friend who starts the conversation. I can't tell you how much it will mean to someone. If you have ideas for further topics, please reach out to me. I love hearing from you. Your emails and your tweets and your texts and your Instagram DMs are so welcome and so amazing. If you want to hear more, every episode is available on my website, christiebishop.com. That's Christiebishop.com. You can find all previous episodes, and you can also book me for speaking engagements, for training, coaching, and marketing consulting. I've only been doing that for the last 20 plus years. It's one of my first loves. So again, thank you for listening. And until next time, I'm Christy Bishop, and this is What Nobody Tells Us.